for the panel discussions, what we have five interesting speakers. Mr. Manoj will be joining us soon on the stage. First, I call upon Dr. Ramanathan Sethuraman, who has 23 years of research and development experience in media, algorithms, architectures, post his PhD at Indian Institute of Science. These R&D activities were carried out at Philips Research Labs, Netherlands, Silicon Hive, which have a startup from PRL, and Intel, which acquired Silicon Hive in 2011. 5 years of experience as Director of India Operations and Video Product Management at Silicon Hive. Invented VSP, Video Signal Processor Architecture at PRL, formed Silicon Hive startup in Bangalore, and productized VSP used in Samsung TV series 9 and above. At Intel, was a video architect at platform architecture team of mobile client product groups for 4 years. Currently with Data Platform Group as principal engineer, focused on emerging server usages, healthcare and media analytics, based on deep learning, have mentored several PhD and MS students, have 14 US patents and 20 plus US patent applications in. Thank you, Dr. Ramanathan Sethuraman, for joining us. Next, I welcome Dr. Ramesh Bairapuneni, Managing Director at India Partners, a cardiologist turned venture capitalist. He invests mainly in digital health and medical devices. Entrepreneurship and innovation always spurred Ramesh, leading him to be the president of TAI Hyderabad. He's also the founding director of Hyderabad Angels. With his rich experience of 23 years as a cardiologist, he endeavors to be a part of the healthcare innovation story. Prior to India, at Venture East, he invested in companies like One Breath, which is into mechanical ventilation, and Smart RX, an innovator in mobile engagement platform for healthcare. Dr. Ramesh is also an angel investor with NephroPlus, India's largest chain of dialysis clinics. Welcome, Dr. Ramesh Bairapuneni. Dr. Gurishankar, worldwide lead, medical devices, Amazon Web Services, globally experienced medical products executive with extensive background in successfully driving transformational growth and innovation, product innovation and commercial innovation by integrating insights, marketing, and product development. Proven leader with demonstrated ability to toggle between short-term flawless execution and long-term strategic planning with significant experience in US and emerging markets. We also have with us Dr. Marcus Rani. Mr. Rani is very interesting. He's called a well-being champion and planetary health, from planetary health. And from sick care to well-being, Dr. Marcus Rani's career journey over the past decades have led him from patient's bedside to a wider stage as he has a global impact via systematic change. He completed his Bachelor's of Science and Medical degrees from University College of Madras Medical School in London. His passion for extreme physiology has allowed him to conduct field research across the planet, with expeditions taking him to sites of Everest, skiing, and Arctic and European Alps. He served as a medical officer in Royal Air Force and at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. So I leave the floor open for the panel to start discussions on the topic of the day. Over to you, the panelists. As and when the other people join, we'll put them onto the stage.
So maybe to kickstart this discussion while we are still waiting for Manoj to join, I think in the times of COVID, with lots of new technologies and medical devices are getting more visibility, I would say, compared to in the past, right? What are your experiences? I do have experiences in the recent 9 months, which I will share. Well, what are your experiences, Dr. Ramesh and Marcus, on medical devices, especially newer medical devices, RT-PCR systems? There's a lot of claim about under 1 hour, COVID testing and so on, right? The traditional RT-PCR devices used to take a couple of hours or even more. with the newer ones, you can do it under 1 hour. So what is your take on the way in which these devices are shaping up, and how do you see it going forward? Ramesh, it's a question to you from the engineering side to the medical side. Ramesh, you are on mute, I think.
Yeah. We see a lot of articles in the press that COVID has completely changed the way healthcare, a lot of tailwinds are there. I would say probably to take a contrarian approach, probably not much. Why I'll give an example is the Amazon, Berkshire, Morgan, JP Morgan initiative has been closed down. So what it gives a message is healthcare is a very complex subject. It's almost like clubbing the entire technology into one group. Like healthcare, you have medicines, small molecules, your large molecules, your diagnostic tests, your hospitals, your pharmacies. That's on the negative side. The positive side is, as you rightly said, in India, for example, or even the world, for example, for the first time in the last 100 years, from the time a new disease has come, identifying the disease, genomic sequencing, ability to produce a diagnostic test, whether it's PCR or whether it is rapid antigen test or antibody test, or even a vaccine, less than 12 months. mRNA technology is 30 years. The poor lady was working, I'm sure she'll get a Nobel Prize this year. She was working for the last 20, 30 years, but we're able to commercialize it within 12 months. I think what happened was that fabulous coordination between the academia like Oxford's, startups like BioNTech, large industry, large corporates like Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and regulatory authorities very proactively taking decisions, or even government. I think this is the first time it happened. Hopefully, we expect, I'm sure this will continue in the future, and that's the point actually. May not be the digital death. Overall, I feel that's what COVID has brought positiveness to the entire scientific community.
Okay, thank you. Marcus, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the great takeaway from 2020 has been the global realization of the competitive strategic advantage that well-being plays in our lives. For all too long, for those of us like, all of us and others who've been involved in this sector, we've been banging on the drum of just why this is such a critical sphere for our countries. In fact, it's a national security issue in many instances as COVID has thrown out. But we've had GDP expenditures and national budgets of less than 2%, 3%, etc. So I think this has been a great moment for all the nations of the world that have realized just what an intrinsically important role that our health and well-being plays, and if the entire economic system can come to a collapse and standstill in just 3 months of us having to stay at home because of a single-stranded RNA virus, which is less than 50 nanometers across, then we've got to get our act together and do something about it pretty soon. I've been a little fortunate with the work that I do at the World Economic Forum and the Atlantic Council, in the fact that now, because of this systemic enlightenment, awakening that has happened, there are a number of systems which are now coming into fold, including the technologies that you spoke about, and how we can now create mechanisms of designing mechanisms to try and prevent these type of situations from arising again, whether it's a global immune system, which is being spoken about, or a pandemic preparedness board, where you have sensors from the edge to the cloud, monitoring effluent plants, monitoring the water table, monitoring food systems, monitoring the ecological and the climate systems, etc. So I think we've all got a lot of great things that are to come, and technology is going to be front and center in those systemics rollout.
I think that's a good point of view, Marcus, tying up to well-being compared to, the sick care that we have seen all through, right? I had one related question to well-being, and especially, data is the king. and we know that data is pretty much residing in silos in hospitals, diagnostic labs, pretty much difficult to extract anything out, and people don't want to share. Even if you get them to share, they are not standardized. There are lots of issues around data, right? Getting clean, curated data, I think people spend 80% of their time, and probably the remaining 20 to get deeper insight. Moving into from sick care to well-being, do you see a remarkable change in the way data is going to, move from hospitals to individuals, patient-centric? Because now mobile phones, you can, pretty much you have applications that's counting the number of steps that you take every single day. It's analyzing your speech to tell whether you have a cough or a cold, things like that, right? So looking at your vitals and so on. So do you see a phenomenal, change in the way data is going to appear in the coming, time, and how this is going to regulate, innovation and insights for various diseases going forward? More well-being, less disease. So let me put it, less sick care, more well-being.
I think we're definitely seeing a zeitgeist shift towards upstream behavioral, upstream mechanisms of the disease rather than the manifestations of it. What I find most fascinating, and I come at this from the sort of health and wellness aspect as opposed to being a hardcore technologist, is, we have platforms around the world which are making sense of real-time data flows for commercial purposes, whether it's the little device which is above my shoulder here, the Amazon Echo device that I have, or the Google Home or the Nest or any of those things. And so clearly, when the incentives are well aligned, we overcome the challenges around interoperability, around cleaning data, around use cases, etc. I think it's a case now of figuring out how we can align those incentives so that the individual, the care provider, the payer, the provider, the infrastructure, the system, the government system, all of those are accordingly working in one motion so that we reach that holy grail, which we know will help prevent the, whatever it is, $5 trillion healthcare spends or northwards that we spend every year around the world. All right, so let me ask you guys a question. How do we use technology to solve these big problems that we're facing around health and wellness? What are some of the things that you have access to? Because you're both involved, obviously, as an investor, and then you working within industry. What are some of the most exciting things that you have on your palette, which we can look forward to over the next sort of 18 to 24 months that you can talk about as well?
Yeah, maybe I can say what we are doing in the context of COVID.
Yeah.
Right. So in Intel India, we promoted use of made in India MolBio RT-PCR TrueNAT device, and this is for COVID diagnostics and also for Oxford Nanopore. I don't know whether you've heard about this name. This is a long-read genome sequencing device for COVID. And other co-infection microbe sequencings as well. We chose this technology simply because it had high quality, high throughput, low cost, and more importantly, portability. Given COVID, and you have sequencing devices which are non-portable and huge capex cost and low throughput, you really cannot sequence a lot of genomes, right? So this gave us a sort of a leeway into potentially taking these devices in a suitcase or a backpack, and you can forget getting samples, COVID samples shipped with all associated issues at scale. Yeah. So this gave us a nice framework for having deep into village deployment, right? So that's on the device side, I'm quite upbeat. There are lots of devices that are coming up, which especially for communicable diseases like what we're facing today, I see a lot of problems in the data side. And as I said upfront, it's in a, we have so far, about 10.5 million COVID infections and about 150K deaths in India. And we are struggling to get a few thousand size data set clinical laboratory and genomic to get deeper insight, to build risk stratification, mortality prediction models, right? That's you have loads of data lying in silos, non-standardized, difficult to pull out or extract information. I think that's the biggest problem, and that's where most of the model builders, spend a huge amount of time. I think this is a real, engineering work one can do to fix this problem, right? So there has to be some standardization to ensure, that the data is clean. There are technologies that Intel is also investing in. You don't want to move data. This is the biggest problem when you have, genomic data, which are tens of gigabytes, right? And also radiology, pathology images are tens of megabytes. So you need to move learning part of the model to where the data is, which leads us to federated learning. And Intel is heavily invested in building solutions here, right? But of course, you need to make sure that we have standardization in hospitals and diagnostic labs to harvest data in uniform format to feed these algorithms. That's my take.
Manoj, would you mind?
That's a great.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very great insight. And I think some of the challenges that we have seen in some of the other developing or developed countries, I think we can take advantage of that, specifically as it comes to India. I think we have a fairly clean slate in order to look at standards and look at how these standards can basically help us get very clean data in order to get the right insights. Dr. Ram, thank you for sharing those insights. Let's move on to something very unique about our NASSCOM product conclave is about products and how these product organizations are basically shaping up and helping us solve some of the complex problems of healthcare. So let me turn to you, Dr. Ramesh, and with your unique perspective, specifically with regard to being a clinician, having worked 23 years in that particular field, and also invested a lot in some of the digital therapeutics and areas of your interest from the venture capital perspective in digital. How do you see the application of technologies towards helping people live healthier lives, and how the health tech product companies are catching up on these trends and making an impact on the overall ecosystem?
Yeah, Manoj, before you joined, actually, we are debating on that. In fact, I was referring to the Haven episode, the three biggest players, Berkshire, Amazon, and JP Morgan. Unfortunately, they've closed down the initiative. We may not be privy to what is happening. And I was referring to healthcare is such a complex subject, whether it is on the wellness side, prevention, or treatment side, it's such a complex thing. Except e-commerce or e-pharmacy, which we call digital tech, boil the entire ocean is very challenging. It's not a very difficult beast. You can't be you can't be a solution for everything. I think, but then at the same time, there are tremendous opportunities, I would say, for digital health to play a role. One has to wear the hat like a doctor, for example. A patient, there are 30, 40 clinical specialties: medicine, surgery, cardiology. In cardiology, again, there are 5 subspecialties: pediatric cardiology, adult cardiology, non-invasive, invasive, electrophysiology. And again, there are a lot of diseases out there. And all these years, patient comes, we give medicine. But I'm sure that supplemented by a digital tech can have a tremendous impact. I'll give you 5, 6 examples. I'll take neurology, for example, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinsonism, very limited role for drugs. But adding a digital app, there are tremendous clinical studies done, validated, they're able to show better results. Or take mental health, for example, chatbots, for example, or even drug addiction. There are FDA-approved products, doctors prescribe along with the medicine, and again, they have shown tremendous benefit. Or even take very common diabetes. India itself has 65 million diabetics. Hypertension, 200 million hypertensive people are there in the world. Put the entire world together, And there can be an app along with the medicine and what we call the digital therapeutics. Or bronchial asthma, for example. Many people take inhalers and we don't monitor the environmental data and we don't monitor how much is taking the inhalers. Are they taking it appropriately? So there are tremendous examples. So like a medicine, like a small molecule or a large molecule, I take the same approach. Digital tech can't be a solution for everything. You go after a specific disease and autism, for example, again, no drugs available. There can be a digital product actually. So I think the technology people, the startups have to wear the hat of a disease-centric approach, and they should not feel these opportunities are small actually. They're quite large. Take the entire world, hundreds of millions of patients every disease. And I think I strongly believe that's the way for digital therapeutics, that's the way for digital health tech to solve problems. I'll come to the other problem later, especially the National Digital Health Mission, which is started by the Government of India. If everyone owns their own data and is the way to exchange the data that when they need the care, I think that's a great opportunity.
Great.
That we can discuss.
No, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ramesh. And I can see Dr. Guru Shankar has joined in.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me.
And a very, very good morning to you. For waking up early to be here on this panel, I think the technology is really playing with us today. But thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Dr. Guru Shankar, we were actually on the topic of talking about how the health tech product companies are really rising to the occasion, or what are the kind of things that they should be doing in order to catch up to this particular trends and making an impact on the overall ecosystem. Specifically with regard to the work that you or your organization in the past, tremendous healthcare experience that you come with, how do you see the role of health tech companies in this particular area, or the era of digital and solving some of the complex problems in the healthcare side?
Yeah, whether it is pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, we've always been on this track of the bigger health tech or data companies. Where you can call it, in many ways you can call it, it's all at the end of the day, it's all data interoperability. How do I break down data silos? I can take that either on the clinical side. How do I break data silos so that I can predict the health of the patient, monitor the health of the patient, all of that on one side? Or you can take the same approach and you can take the same concepts all the way on the supply chain side of it. How do I break down the data silos between my various supply chain triggers so that the products are all reaching the right place at the right time? Either way you take it, it's at the end of the day, it's all about data, breaking down the data silos. It's one thing to actually federate the data and have the patients own it, but more importantly, it's about what you do with it. We all collect 20,000 data points about the patient. At the end of the day, it has to, are you able to build a model that actually predicts what's going to happen? Are you able to build a model that tells what's going to happen either on the clinical side or where the patient is trending or where the supply chain is trending or where the manufacturing is trending? It's all about data and the trending and the building of the models around that. I think that's the key area. That's something that has always been on the roadmap, that's always been worked on, even without the pandemic. And what the pandemic has done is it has actually emphasized certain areas. Say, for example, using data for clinical modeling has always been there, but the pandemic has laid stress on the supply chain side of the equation. So that's the way to think about it. And the best cases is you can actually go online and look at some case studies of model building for predictive congestive heart failures and a bunch of other events using existing EMR data that's already available online. So things of that nature is where the crux is going. And I think when we talk specifically with respect to India, I think you got to take it, there are two different things. While this is happening at the worldwide level, specifically for India, it's all about scale and reach. How do I build anything which has scale? How do I build anything which has reach? Something that's beyond the 6 or 8 metros, and how do I get down to I'm not talking all the way bottom of the pyramid, but at least how do I get to the 50% of the population? How do I get the reach? Especially given chronic diseases, diabetes, congestive heart failure, and your chronic kidney diseases. How do I get the reach and how do I get there? That's the crux of the equation. And hopefully we dial up on that side and go down that path.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Gurusankar, for those insights. Let me kind of pivot now. Specifically, we have talked about some of the predictive models and how we can actually take care of the sick, and also basically try and see that how we can keep patients away from hospitals, so to say, in a plain language. But let me turn to Dr. Marcus. Dr. Marcus, I want to kind of pick up a little bit on the book that you've written, and very interesting, At the Human Edge. Would like to know a little bit more on that and how you link that, from the point of view of what's going on currently in the healthcare landscape, and specifically the message to the health tech product organizations or the product companies. How do they need to think about these particular problems, and more so at scale, as Dr. Gurusankar said, and also basically taking care of adoption and hyper-personalization?
My fascination, Manoj, has always been in trying to understand how we can achieve the most out of this organic machine that we've been given, both in terms of its physiology and in terms of the psychology as well. And as I think the introduction sort of articulated the journey that I was on from the Air Force to human spaceflight, then medicine, and then a series of other things after that. The work that I do now and the whole premise of the Human Edge is really that the book is about physiology in different extreme settings. But what I'm trying to articulate is for us to understand how it is that we can bring closer the gap that exists between the knowledge and the execution, right? A lot of us know what we need to do in life. It's actually not rocket science. You got to eat, 3 proper square meals. You got to get 8,000 to 10,000 steps. You got to sleep 8 hours a day. You got to drink 3 liters, etc., etc. But we aren't able to do that, and this is the behavioral science problem, which is the gap. And for all the clinicians, I'm sure everyone has always wondered. You tell the patient, go away, do this test, take these medicines, do this, and then they come back and see you in 3 months, and they haven't done half of that, and their diseases have got worse. And it's you're thinking, well, I told you what you need to do. Why didn't you just go away and do that simple thing? So that's the gap which I'm trying to solve with the work that I'm doing at the Human Edge. It's bringing together the information, the knowledge versus the execution. And I think that behavioral sciences problem is something that a lot of folks who are listening in, who are working on products across the realm, whether it's the disease side, and Dr. Ramesh spoke a lot and articulated very well about digital therapeutics and what diabetes management and respiratory management and cardiovascular management, all of those can do, all the way to the side that I work on, which is on the well-being side, which is around what you put in terms of fueling the body, how you move the body, what you should be consuming for your body and mind, etc. So these are some very interesting behavioral sciences problems to solve for. And one of the fundamental aspects that I believe is missing right now is the incentive alignment between a tech platform and how it views success. You look at the social networks, for example, where success is viewed as daily active users, monthly active users, time spent on the app, number of minutes, likes and shares, versus the actual impact that is created for the individual. They are completely misaligned, right? So this is what we need to try and solve for. How can we align the growth of the individual to the growth of the platform, so that the investor stakeholder and the consumer stakeholder and the business stakeholder, all of them are working in the same direction. So, all the product people out there, there's plenty of opportunity to design around this. And I hope that we can use this as a platform to do so as well.
Great. No, thank you, Dr. Marcus. And given that where we are on the time and technology has really kind of, challenged us today, but let me do one thing. I think these are some of the fundamental challenges that we talked about during the course of our discussion. And we definitely need to solve for and shape a health system that brings every aspect of healthcare together. So this brings me towards the end of this discussion, but I would like to gather some final thoughts from each one of you on how do you reimagine healthcare delivery and consumption, and how product organizations adopt a digital-first mindset to carve the future of healthcare. Any insights that you can provide specifically around, there are ambient technologies. We are looking at home at healthcare, home health. We are also basically looking at, the predictive side of it, as many of you basically talked about. But where is it all heading? And what is in it for, product organizations to basically look for? And how should they basically be approaching? And Dr. Marcus, you touched a little bit upon that. But anything that you can actually talk about from a reimagination perspective on how do we reimagine healthcare of the future and start today? So maybe Dr. Ramesh, we can start with you. I'll hand it over to you.
We want to hear from Dr. Guru Shankar, especially with the Haven, what exactly happened. Because I still feel if Amazon can't solve it with the help of JP Morgan and Berkshire, what can any other country do it? But having said that, I'll give a couple of examples. Facebook suddenly post a picture of mine 10 years back, suddenly 5 years back, 3 years back, in 1 year. That's one example. If you ask me, do I know my weight, my blood sugar, my cholesterol, 1 year back, 5 years back, I don't have the data. Second example I'll give you. In India, for example, especially every lady, any pregnant who has gone through the pregnancy should have got her blood pressure checked, urine examination, all the basic investigations done at least 2-3 times. Where is all the data actually? I'm sure if all the data is available, the way we treat patients will be totally different, prevention as well as curative. Even for example, COVID, for example, we would have detected COVID at least a month in advance if all of us are on a digital platform. For example, assuming there are 1,000 doctors in one city, average I see 1 fever patient per day. That particular month I would have seen 3 fever patients. It would not have a red flag for me. But in the cumulatively, the average fevers are 1,000 per day, 3,000 happen suddenly, it would have been a red flag. So at least even COVID, pandemics can be identified a couple of maybe weeks or months. That would have saved thousands of lives or 100,000s of lives. I think that's the way the digital technologies implemented well can help in prevention of pandemics, in personal health, well-being, as well as disease management. But absolutely there are challenges, and probably I leave to the other esteemed panelists who are part of the big tech companies to throw some light.
I'll take it. I think there's a bifurcation here. On the acute side, it's all about modeling, prediction, what all the things you can do about it. But when you come to the non-acute side, whether on all the chronic care side, I totally agree with Dr. Marcus on this one, which is, in fact, there's been studies, it's been shown, chronic care is some percentage, small percentage of therapeutic, but a bigger percentage of behavior change. It has been shown, whether it is weight loss, whether it is chronic diabetes, whether it is, take any of the things, when you have to make a change, the behavior part of it is more, and that's the reason why even physicians tell you, you pick up any habit, you maintain it for 21 days before it becomes a reality, and it's part of your life. So, and by the way, that is actually, there are papers published to show how behavior change sticks to it. And given that we have found that social media is so addictive and so stickiness, can behavior change be integrated? How does behavior change as a platform? I'm not saying of social media, but some of the learnings from that, how does it create platforms that goes to solve the 100 million diabetic patients, 100 million plus in India, not only in the 8 metros, but you take it down to the 25 tier 2 cities. How does that happen? That is what I mean by scale and reach and technology. That's the space where the three come together. It's not about a fancy model that runs only in 2 of the topmost academic institutions. Yes, it's needed. That's needed, but simultaneously you need to have a 2-pronged approach. That's the way I take it.
So I have Raghu here. Manoj, it's a very interesting discussion. I have a few questions popping up in the Q&A side. Maybe any one of you can take it up. So be in India, like, if you're using the devices, especially the devices which are measuring a lot many parameters nowadays, the entire family uses those devices. You know, so how do you actually try to make sure, that the data is segregated, the data is used properly, and the individual health records are maintained? And how do you actually, that's one question, because we are running short of time, but I'll also ask one more question, which is there on the Q&A. Do we have any biosensors in India which is capable of measuring ECG, SpO2, BP, and temperature? Okay, so these two questions. Then I have one more question for myself, but I'll answer it if the time permits. I'll ask that once time permits.
Yeah, maybe on the first question, Raghu, if I can go, I would refer to a very interesting study, NIH study, Scripps Clinic is doing. 100,000 population, they're taking the genomics data, they're taking the imaging data, whole body MRI, they're taking the physiological data, they're taking the environmental data. They want to monitor for the next 10 years and see what happens. As of today, I see a lot of people monitoring heart rate variability, sleep, and respiratory rate. Really, frankly speaking, I'm not sure what information I'll get out of it. But we give a lot of information sitting. As on today, we don't know how to use it. Maybe 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, we may get better insight. So, yeah.
And the sensors are also getting smaller, and not only are they getting smaller, the number of factors they're measuring, the number of parameters they're measuring is also going up. And you're seeing this, all these things used to be science experiments or nice to have less than 6 months ago, 9 months ago, and now everybody in the world wants it as part of critical care, because this is an enabling stepping stone for telemedicine in a pandemic environment.
So I have one last question for the panelists. This is my favorite, because we have seen a lot of startups coming up with a very siloed innovations. But what we need is a kind of a comprehensive solutions, especially if they have to fit back into the platforms which are there already at the care delivery centers. What would be your one message to the product companies, especially the health tech product companies, when they're going in for innovation?
Raghu, siloed approach may not be a bad idea instead of trying to boil the entire ocean. For example, give an example. AI in endoscopy. Normally people think endoscopy itself is such a small one diagnostic procedure. But just imagine someone is doing upper GI endoscopy from esophagus to stomach, 45 centimeters. In 1 minute, the doctor just puts the endoscope and takes it out. There's no way you can see a 360 degrees, 45 centimeter. A small, you can always pick up a 10 centimeter lesion. Can you pick up a 2 millimeter lesion? No way. And so those kind of applications, they're reasonably large enough, and they will have tremendous impact on early detection of cancer. Like that, innumerable examples in various facets of medicine. So I don't think it's a bad approach to go after a disease-specific digital intervention.
Thank you, Dr. Ramesh. Now, as we come to the end of the session, thank you so much, Manoj. I know we had some little technical challenges getting on you and Dr. Guru Shankar onto the stage, but wonderful insights. And we really take some of the messages, the companies who are listening to this one, the startups listening to these sessions, definitely have a message to take from these sessions, this panel discussion. And once again, thank you, Dr. Manoj, Mr. Manoj, Dr. Ramesh, Dr. Ramanathan, Dr. Guru Shankar, and Dr. Marcus for joining us on this wonderful platform.